Danielle Colby finally breaks the silence on Frank Fritz, and it's huge for American Pickers fans. People have been guessing about Frank's exit and Danielle's thoughts for years. Now, she's ready to talk.
The room was quiet. Mike Wolfe walked in, looking tired and serious. Danielle Colby stood next to him, not saying anything yet. But you could tell she felt a lot inside. Everyone had been talking for so long, stories, guesses, things that weren't true. People were confused. What really happened with Frank Fritz? Why did their friendship fall apart? Then Mike began to speak. His voice wasn't loud, but every word was clear. He talked about the mistakes, the things that went wrong, and the pain that none of them had shared before. Danielle nodded, and then she spoke too. Her words were soft, but honest. They both said sorry, not just with words, but in a way that showed they meant it. For the first time, the truth was out. It wasn't about pointing fingers. It was about being real, about facing the past, even if it hurt. This wasn't just a simple story. It was about friendship, broken trust, and the hard road to making things right. The court appearance. What we know. In a shocking turn of events, Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby made a public appearance in court, something fans never expected to see. For years, American Pickers fans had been cheering for Mike, Frank, and Danielle. The trio seemed inseparable, always sharing laughs, adventures, and the occasional disagreement on screen. But behind closed doors, the bond was beginning to fracture. The court appearance wasn't about any legal battle between Mike and Danielle. It wasn't a lawsuit or any accusations between them. Instead, the courtroom drama was about something much more serious. Frank Fritz's guardianship and his care. Frank's health had deteriorated rapidly, especially after he suffered a stroke in 2022. He was no longer able to care for himself in the way he used to. His fans, friends, and loved ones were worried about his future. At the center of the conversation in the courtroom was Frank's well-being and who would make decisions for him moving forward. Mike and Danielle were there because they were named in Frank's guardianship case. It was an emotional moment, not for some lawsuit or fight, but because they were finally facing the reality of what had happened to their dear friend, Frank. The tone of the courtroom was somber, filled with tension and remorse. Mike and Danielle both appeared emotional, clearly regretful for the way things had turned out. Their expressions were serious, their voices quiet. They spoke about the difficult years that had followed Frank's departure from American Pickers. Their apologies were heartfelt. It wasn't easy to listen to, but it was clear that both Mike and Danielle were in a place of deep reflection. In court, Mike admitted he had failed to reach out to Frank sooner. He said, "I should have called him. I should have checked on him more. I let my own life get in the way." Danielle echoed those sentiments, looking at the judge with a look of guilt and sadness. She said, "I'm sorry for not doing more, for not being there for both men in the way I should have been. I should have made more of an effort to keep the team together." You could feel the weight of their words. Both had spent years working side by side with Frank, and the bond they shared with him had become a part of who they were. But somehow, somewhere along the way, the distance grew. The judge in the room listened patiently, acknowledging the emotional nature of the situation, but also reminding them of the importance of doing what's best for Frank moving forward. There was no anger in the courtroom, just a sense of sadness and realization that things had gone off track. Mike and Danielle made it clear that they never intended to hurt Frank, and they admitted their own struggles played a part in the distance that had grown between them. Their explanation wasn't filled with excuses, but with an honest admission of failure. They recognized that things could have been handled better, and that the challenges behind the scenes had taken a toll on everyone involved. Danielle Colby's statement, loyalty and regret. Danielle Colby, like Mike, had a lot to say during the court proceedings. As someone who had been there from the start of American Pickers, Danielle's loyalty to both Frank and Mike was clear. She always spoke highly of both men, and it was evident she had tried to be the peacemaker behind the scenes. But even she admitted that she hadn't done enough to keep the bond strong. In her statement, Danielle expressed deep regret for not stepping in sooner to address the rift. She said, "I was caught in a place where I thought things would get better on their own. I didn't want to interfere, but I should have. I should have fought harder for both of them. For all of us. She acknowledged how much the entire situation had weighed on her. It wasn't just about the show or the work they did together. It was about friends who had once been like family. Fans have seen Danielle speak publicly about the fallout, and they know she's never been shy about her emotions. At one point, she even shared a video on social media where she was visibly emotional. "I miss Frank, and I miss the old days," she said, wiping away a tear. It wasn't just a post. It was a raw expression of how deeply this affected her. Danielle's tone was one of sincere regret, as she reflected on the years they had lost, and how, in hindsight, there were things she wished she could have done differently. It was clear from her statement that Danielle never stopped caring for Frank, and she wished more than anything that things could have been different. "I want to be there for him now," she said, "and I just hope it's not too late." In that moment, you could tell that Danielle's heart was still very much tied to the past, to the friendship she shared with Frank and Mike, and to the hope that one day they could heal together. Mike Wolfe's apology and reflection. Mike Wolfe, always known for his tough exterior, didn't hold back during his statement in court. In front of the judge and the public, he let down his guard and spoke from the heart. "I never meant to hurt Frank. I never wanted things to go this way," Mike said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I let fame get in the way of the most important thing in my life, my friendships. I thought I had all the time in the world to make things right, but I was wrong." Mike took responsibility for the fallout. He admitted that he had allowed the pressures of his success to take precedence over the friendships that had made American Pickers what it was. "I was busy. I was wrapped up in the show, in everything else. And I didn't take the time to reach out to Frank like I should have. I regret that. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." His words were heavy, but they were the words of someone who had learned a painful lesson. Mike's apology was more than just words. It was a reflection of the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. He understood that no amount of success or fame could replace the bond of a true friendship. It was clear that Mike had spent a lot of time thinking about what had gone wrong and how he could have been a better friend to Frank. "I should have called him sooner. I should have been there," he said, with deep remorse in his voice. In that courtroom, it wasn't just about a legal matter. It was about the acknowledgement of past mistakes and a desire to heal the wounds that had been caused. Mike's words were sincere, and while they couldn't undo the past, they were a step toward making things right. The truth behind the scenes. What really happened. As Mike and Danielle spoke in court, they began to reveal what had truly happened behind the scenes. The story of Frank's departure from American Pickers wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. There were personal struggles, health issues, and miscommunications that had led to the rift. Mike explained that he and Frank had always had a strong friendship, but over time, things began to change. There were creative differences, and there were personal things going on. "Frank and I just weren't on the same page anymore," Mike said. He didn't go into specifics, but it was clear that both he and Frank were facing personal battles that affected their ability to work together. For Mike, the pressure of keeping the show going and dealing with the day-to-day demands of the job took a toll. Frank's absence, especially when he was battling health issues, only made things worse. Danielle shared her own perspective, talking about how she had tried to mediate but felt helpless at times. "We were all struggling in our own way," she said, "but we didn't communicate like we should have, and that was a big mistake." The tension between Mike and Frank had reached a point where even Danielle, the mediator, felt that she couldn't do enough to bridge the gap. "I should have done more," she admitted. It was heartbreaking to hear, but it was also a reminder of how often personal issues, whether health struggles, emotional pain, or misunderstandings, can drive a wedge between even the closest of friends. The fallout wasn't due to any one person's actions, it was the result of a combination of things that spiraled out of control. But in the courtroom, Mike and Danielle took responsibility for their part in it. What happened between Mike, Danielle, and Frank wasn't easy, but facing the truth never is. Their words in court gave a deeper look into a story that many thought they already knew. Now, with everything out in the open, there's a chance for healing, for understanding, and maybe even for something new to begin. If this story moved you or made you see things differently, Don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe for more updates as this story continues to unfold.